We've got people that are connecting, and I'll give you some time. My name is Marge Doss, and I am a member of Women's Voices and have been for a while. And as a retiree from the special school district, I now have time to do some projects like this. Hello, Courtney. I'm glad you made it. So we all know that schools have been the battleground for the culture wars that our country's been through in the last few years. And those of us that work in schools also know that they are an incredible support system for children and families. And here in St. Louis, we are unique in having a special district for children with special needs. And it came about because of the advocacy of parents back in the 1950s. And I am always impressed with the story and feel that too few people know it. And so as Women's Voices members are involved with advocacy for child welfare and education issues, I really thought this was an opportunity to share some of that information. Karen Francis, our chair for the advocacy committee, had encouraged me to organize a lunch and learn. And so I asked my former boss, Kelly Grigsby, to come on and talk with us about the district and take your questions. I had the good fortune to work with Kelly when she was principal of Ackerman Elementary School. It's in Florissant, in the North County campus, which includes Northview High School and North County Technical School. And really admired her leadership, especially in the aftermath of the Michael Brown killing and the impact it had on our school community. And it really highlighted, again, the inequity of education in St. Louis area. And I admired the work of Women's Voices in addressing some of that inequity. So that's why we invited Dr. Kelly, as my students called her, who is now the SSD Executive Director of Schools and Programs, to lunch with us today. She holds a doctorate in educational leadership, an education specialist degree in educational administration, and master's degree in special education, and a bachelor's in criminology. So she's going to share with us some information about this unique St. Louis institution. So it's your turn, Kelly.
Okay. Good morning or afternoon, I guess. We're kind of on the borderline, everybody. Thanks for having me today. And thank you for your work. The organization does great work from what I was able to read and what Marge has told me. And so I'm really, really thrilled to be with you here today. So I'm going to share my screen, but the way I have my stuff set up, my PowerPoint's going to be on this side and I'm looking at the camera on this side. So I'm not looking at someone in the room or doing any weird stuff. If my eyes are kind of drifting over here, I'm just trying to figure out what I'm trying to say based on what's on my PowerPoint. All right. I believe how you guys work this is you have questions at the end. It's a small group, so I'm not opposed to taking questions as we go if you have any, but I'll leave that up to your group and how you like to organize your work. Again, Marge said, I'm Kelly Grigsby, and I am an executive director with Special School District. Started out as a teacher in Ferguson, Florissant with Special School District about 21 years ago. Then spent some time in a role called an area coordinator role, also in Ferguson, Florissant, supporting Ferguson, Florissant School District with special education. So I spent some time there and then moved over into my role as principal for Ackerman School, and now into this role. And I've been in this role. This is my third year as the executive director. So it's been a wild ride through COVID and all the things that go with it, but I'm excited to be here in a larger capacity to support a lot of things. So today I'm going to give you an overview of Special School District, talk with you a little bit about, who we are, what we do, and then some challenges that we're facing, and maybe some work that you all might be able to tackle on your end. Okay. All right. Here we go. So as Marsh talked about, a special school district was formed out of a concern for supporting and serving students who had disabilities. So in 1957, there was a referendum in St. Louis County to establish a public school district to support students with disabilities. This was long before any federal law requirement and state law requirement. So a little bit ahead of its time. It's unique. Special school districts really only one or two of us in the whole entire country, the way we deliver special education services. So our school district covers all of St. Louis County. That means we work with Hazelwood, we work with Hancock, we work with Maple Richmond Heights. So any school district that is public school district within St. Louis County, we provide the special education supports. So we hire the teachers, we hire the paraprofessionals, any of the other, and we're going to kind of go through this as we move through the presentation, but we employ about 7,000 people that provide the supports to all of St. Louis County with regards to special education. So passed a referendum in 1957, opened up our first school. Shortly thereafter, began servicing students though in 1958, about 166 students receiving special education at that time. As you'll see in a minute, we've grown to over 22,000 students now that receive special education services in St. Louis County. So 1975, so we're kind of doing our thing for about 15 years, and then 1975, Public Law 94-142, which is the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, was passed. And so at that point, we had some federal mandates and such, and then also came with funding and things like that. So that's a little bit of a history of how we came to be. So one thing to know is special school district has its own operating levy. So if you look on your property taxes, your tax bill, you'll see your local school district if you live in St. Louis County, and then you'll see special school district. So there are two, we have our own tax base. When we go out for a tax levy or a bond issue or whatever, we're going out that for our district to provide supports and to improve our facilities and such. We have our own Board of Education. It's a little different though, in that our Board of Education is not elected by people in St. Louis County. Our Board of Education is elected by a governing council. And the governing council is comprised of one board member from each of the local school districts in St. Louis County. So Ferguson Florissant sends a member, that's their member for the governing council. So we have 22 districts in St. Louis County, and that is the group that elects our board. So our board they run for a seat, they make their case, and the decision comes from the governing council on who's on our board. We have 7 board members. So we have our board is comprised of 7 different sub-districts. I don't have that information in here, but it's easy to find. It's all on our website. It's kind of tricky because it depends on like the population. So you want some equity within number that you're representing, but it's a little wonky in that. So like Hazelwood is paired up now with Maplewood Richmond Heights, where geographically those districts aren't anywhere near one another. And with regards to probably what their issues may or may not be, may be very different, a small district versus a big district, but that's the way the law is set up. We have to have a percentage of each has to have a percentage, if that makes sense. And then we also have, in addition to providing special education, we also have 2 technical schools, technical high schools that are part of special school districts. So North Technical High School, South Technical High School are both part of special school districts as well. All right. So a little bit about our district. We are the 10th largest employer in St. Louis. So for us to be so not maybe known out there, but being such a large employer, and we really do need to get our word out there, because we'll talk about it in a minute. One of our biggest challenges is finding people who want to work with our students. So really getting the word out and letting folks know that, hey, we're here and we're a large employer, and we want to be invested in St. Louis County and the St. Louis region. $475 million a year in operating revenue, $459 million in expenditures. So not only are we a large employer, but we have a large budget. We cover about 510 square miles. So all of St. Louis County is about 510 square miles. Service 24,728 students in 265 schools. And so this is a little bit different. It's hard to understand. We live it, so it's easy for us. But so we operate our own schools, which are called special education schools. And then we also support students who stay in their home school districts to receive support. So across St. Louis County, there are 265 public schools. Just a little bit of a breakdown of our staff. Have about 477 part-time staff, 5,296 full-time staff. 76% of our staff employed hold some type of advanced degree. And on average, our teachers have about 13 years of teaching experience. We have 236 administrators that support the district, 1,743 paraprofessionals. And paraprofessionals are the same thing as a teacher's assistant. So a lot of places they use, or teacher's aide, they use those terms. We use the term paraprofessional. We have 2,742 or 47 teacher level staff. And when we talk about teacher level staff, we're talking about teachers, but we're also talking about speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, school psychologists, all of those related services that we're also going to talk about here in a second. And then to run a school district, we run our own buses. So we provide transportation. We have to maintain our buildings. We do contract out for food service and for custodial services, but we have grounds and all of that type of thing. So $70 operational staff, and then just 477 additional staff members. My guess is that would cover secretarial support or office administration. Our schools. So like I said, within our district, we send staff into our partner districts to provide special education services. We also operate our own schools. So Ackerman School is Ackerman and Northview serve Ferg Floor, Jennings, Riverview, and Hazelwood. Ackerman is the elementary school. It's K through 8. Northview is a school that's 9 through 21 years of age. So 9th grade through 21 years of age. In our central corridor, that really services from Normandy south to Kirkwood. That would be Litzinger is the K through 8 school, and then New Owner provides the high school experience for the central corridor. And then our South School, which serves our South districts, Melville, Hancock, Bayless, parts of Rockwood, that is Southview. And Southview is a little bit different than the other schools in that it serves students in kindergarten through 21 years of age. So those are considered, they're called public separate schools. So when we get to talking about continuum of services and placement, those schools are public separate schools. We're very fortunate in our district that we have this opportunity. I know some people feel different kinds of way about it. Some people are like, students should not be in special education only schools, but for some of our students, that's the only opportunity that they've had to have a successful school environment. So it gets a little tricky. We do have North Tech and South Tech, which I talked about, and then the 265 partner district schools and 22 St. Louis County school districts that we partner. So our students, this is just a little bit of demographics on our students. 648 of our students attend those public separate schools I was talking about, your Ackerman, Litzinger, South. We have about 20,000, a little over 20,000 students in partner districts, which means they are staying in their home school district, hopefully as close to their home schools as possible. 868 students are supported in our special education programs for early childhood. This is also misleading in that there aren't only 868 students who need special education early childhood services in St. Louis County, but some of the local school districts have chosen to provide their own early childhood programming. So there's something called a coalition district, and then special education, a special school district provides special education for early childhood in a different group of districts. So that's a little tricky, a little different than, so that number is a little bit missing. We have about 1,400 students that attend our career technical education centers. SNAP is about 953. So SNAP is, there's a long acronym. It's an acronym for a long thing, and I'll talk about it here in a minute. But what you need to know about SNAP is it provides the special education services to students who are in parochial, private schools, parochial schools, maybe being homeschooled. We have an obligation to provide, if the families want that, special education services to support them. It looks very different than an IEP. It's a service plan, but that's kind of in the weeds, but we do provide those services as well. We have about 556 students on homebound, which means there's a couple different ways a student or a reason a student might be on homebound. Homebound means they receive their services at home or at a local, maybe a public library or some type of public place or virtually. Oftentimes these are students who are very medically fragile, maybe recovering from a surgery, but we also serve some students that have received long-term suspension. So part of the legislation or the law basically says that even if a student is suspended for any reason, they're still entitled to their special education services. And that's a very simple statement, and there's a lot of things that go into that, but that's not for this. We also provide the educational services at the Juvenile Detention Center. So within the Juvenile Detention Center in Clayton, there is a school, and we staff that school. We have administrative support at that school. Typically 45 up to 65 students transitioning in and out of the juvenile detention center. In our district, for the 24,000 students we serve, 97% of them are attending school in their home districts, which is good. That's what you want. About 60% of those students receive are qualify for free or reduced lunch. And then you can see our demographics with regards to the race of the students that we're serving across the country. So I think that I would be remiss if I didn't give you a little bit of education on special education terms. It's hard to talk about special education and advocacy work because in education, we use a lot of acronyms. And we have a lot of weird names for things that people who are not working in education, it would never occur to them that that would be what something's called. So wanted to just go over a couple of things with you. Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA. This really drives, we have, so that's the federal legislation or federal law that drives what we are obligated to do or what we should be doing at a minimum level for students that identify or not yet identified with disability. And then DESE, the Department of Missouri Education, they have their own kind of play and spin on that, and they have a bunch of rules too. So we're navigating the federal expectations, and then we have state expectations. Some of you may have heard something called child find. So we have an obligation to make sure that we are identifying students that need services, and we receive funding to make sure that we are both trying to introduce interventions to avoid a disability diagnosis, but also making sure that we are identifying children that may or may not that may have a disability and giving them services and introducing services as soon as possible in that process. So that's part of child find. I know you've probably heard the term an IEP, individual education plan. Sometimes it's called individualized education program. This is the document that the team comes together. Once a student has been diagnosed with a disability, they come together to figure out what services the student needs to best access their education. Free and appropriate public education, that's called FAPE. When we talk about it, it's called FAPE. We have an obligation to make sure that students are educated. That's a law. It's also just the right thing to do. And we need to do that in the place that is least restrictive. So you see least restrictive environment, LRE. So if a student has a disability, we wanted to introduce as many supports as we can in a homeschool, as much as we can in a regular education classroom before pulling students out into specialized programming or moving them to a separate school. So that's our responsibility, is to make sure that we are serving students in their least restrictive environment. Special education services, those are the things that we offer, and that's what typically what our staff are going to be offering and why they're in our partner district schools. They're providing maybe instruction in math, specialized instruction in writing, or social emotional skills. So those are the actual services that we are delivering. Related services are the services that we provide that help students access the general ed curriculum. So it might be, we might have students that have a speech impairment. So they may have speech therapy, language therapy, occupational therapy. So what are we doing as occupational therapists to help students do the best they can in school? physical therapy, music therapy. We have lots of related services that we provide, and that makes those our related service therapists. Those are included in our teacher levels. There's something called a continuum of services. So in a continuum of services, you could have something as little as you could have a diagnosis, and you can have as little services as consult, whereas the only thing that's written in your IEP is that the adults in your life and your child and the child's life are consulting with one another to make sure that we have services that we're supporting a student, all the way up to 100% of the time in special education, which would mean they're receiving all of their services from a special education teacher with other students who also have special education diagnosis. IEP placement. So that's when you get into, you've probably heard people talk about, oh, this is resource, this is self-contained, this is a separate school, this is a purchase of service, this is homebound. Those are the placements, and that all plays into the continuum of services. Accommodations and modifications are also addressed in the IEP. And those are things that we can do to accommodate. So maybe things that we can do in the environment, or modifications, maybe something we can do to the actual physical schoolwork or the books, whatever the case may be, in order for students to be able to access those, access the curriculum, and it helps support them make the most progress as possible. We also have an obligation to provide transition services. So in our, one of my areas that I supervise is the transition department. We have transition facilitators in our across the county working with students. We're also using something called Charting the Life course, which is it's a program that really gets students in early on invested in thinking about what they want to do post-secondarily, so that we can and giving them voice in that, both the students and the families. So transition services is really trying to work to support students with disabilities to have an opportunity to live their best life, and do things that they want to do as they move into post-secondary outcomes, post-secondary situations. So services that we provide, I wanted to give you an idea of the types of disabilities that Missouri recognizes as a disability category. So we provide the identification and the evaluation process. So early in the process, you maybe have a student in your school, or you have a child of your own, or a child in your family, whatever, a child that you know, and you think something may not be, this child may need more supports in order to really access their school. So they would be identified as a student with a possible disability. You would work with the school then. There's a whole team of people that would come together, figure out what's been tried, if there's things that can be tweaked within the environment that have nothing to do with getting a disability or getting an IEP, just making some little tweaks. They come together, they do some things to make sure, and if the student's still not responding or still needs more supports, then they would look at the evaluation process. And then your school psychologists go through the evaluation process, evaluate the student. At the end, the student may or may not meet the criteria that Missouri has established to be a student identified as a student with a disability. So many of these areas you probably have heard of before. They're pretty self-explanatory with regard, so I'm not going to read them all to you. You can see them on them. And these are all of the areas in which we would. So the young child with a developmental delay, that's going to be mostly your kids in early childhood, and then also maybe in the first or second year of school age, which would be kindergarten. You typically would have a student diagnosed if they were going to have a disability and they came in as a young child with a developmental delay, they would be diagnosed in kindergarten. They would go through that evaluation process. All right.
Kelly, if I can say one thing.
Sure.
When you look at that list, we in St. Louis County are living in luxury, because for most of the rest of the state, when you have that feeling that something is not right with your grandchild, neighbor child, whatever child, and you go to the local school, they don't have a team set up or somebody that they can just go to and that's their job. Okay. They still have to provide the service legally, but the reality is there is a system in place in St. Louis County that is not available most anywhere else. And I have had numerous parents and colleagues that have moved to the St. Louis area because they had a child that had a traumatic brain injury. Perhaps they survived an auto accident or, whatever. And they are told, if you are going to find what this child needs, you're going to have to live in St. Louis County. And that is so that when we talk about inequity, there is that within the county, but there's an even larger issue when you look at the rest of the state. So just had to put that in there.
No, absolutely. I think that because I've been in special school district the whole time, I need to, it's good for a good reminder for us that we have so many resources in this county for students who need supports. And we are very fortunate to have these services, and people do seek them out. We have people that do move in from other parts of the country even to receive the services in our that we provide by special school districts. So that's why it's so hard to imagine why it's like the best kept secret around. I don't know why, but we need to get it out there for sure. Okay, so SSD services and programs, and we've talked a little bit about this on our as we've moved through the other slides, but so the main point I want to hit home as far as partnering with our local school districts is if you live in, let's say you live in the Melville School District, the special education provided in your school district is provided by special school district. So it's not, Melville does not hire special education teachers and paraprofessionals. We do that hiring in collaboration with Melville or wherever the case may be. In addition, we have special education administrators that support special education programming and staff. And then we also have special education directors that support. So that's kind of the structure: a director, a special ed coordinator, and then your special education staff within a school district. There is no school district in St. Louis County that provides their own special education other than possibly an early childhood program. So that would be it. Talked a little bit about early childhood, so we provide that. Public separate schools, that's your Ackermans, and the difference is the students that attend there, it's a very small percentage of the students in our district. Most of the students are served in their partner district, but students that would attend public separate schools have very significant needs that that really oftentimes cannot be supported in their home school district for whatever reason. It's so we have students that they're very medically fragile, or they have multiple disability areas that are medically related, might be orthopedic, could be sensory impairments. We have students with autism who need a lot of support, maybe sensory or behavioral support. And then we have students who have a lot social emotional needs, and those social emotional needs may call for physical intervention or other supports that may not be provided and may not have the staffing for in that local district. So those are really the tip of the students that if you think of an iceberg, that's the tip of that. We have private separate schools, so about 50 to 65 students in our district. We've decided even in our public separate schools, we do not have enough supports for them. And it's typically students who need more therapeutic or more counseling level supports that we can't provide for them. Those students, we may contract out with an agency to provide to provide their schooling. So we contract with the Lead School, for example, or Every Child's Hope, or Marygrove. Logos, we contract with them. Giant Steps. I think I've missed maybe one or two, but we do that, and that's part of the continuum of services we were talking about. It's also one of the placements. We haven't talked much about. We talked about transition, but as part of that transition, students have an opportunity once they've met their graduation requirements, but we're like, I'm not sure they're ready for that post-secondary piece. They want to enter the workforce, but they need more supports, job skills, those types of things. We have something called the vocational skills program. We have about 250 students across the county that participate in the vocational skills program. These students are from 18 to 21, and they go onto work sites where we have staff, typically a teacher and a support staff, that meet them. Often somewhere between 3 and 6 students might be at that site. We have sites at Mercy Hospital, for example, for students who can be more independent. And then often our students are employed there in different ways, whether it be in lots of different ways in our hospital. So we partner with them. We have students working at the Chase. We have students working in places all over the county, learning those skills, those post-secondary skills. It's a great program. That's our vocational skills program. Talked a little bit about Homebound, and then SNAP, which is the Special Non-Public Access Program. Big long name, but it's just basically SNAP. And then we've talked about technical and adult ed. Adult ed, we have adult ed programs both north and south, North Technical High School and South Technical High School. And those are LPN programs, and they're open to adults in our community. So, I mean, that's pretty, does anyone have any questions about any of the information I've gone over so far demographically? Courtney, it looks like you have a question.
Yes, the question is, we know there's disproportionality in identification. I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about SSD. I know some of the work that SSD has tried to do, but to keep us updated on that. I mean, when you have, if we were to look at a normal curve, to have 50% of the population be African-American, it just, I just like you to speak a little, if you wouldn't mind helping us understand that a little better.
Sure. It's interesting. The demographics of St. Louis County are changing. So whereas it used to be, when we pulled demographic reports over the last year to do some comparison data, I think at this point we are educating about 50% of the students we're educating are African American. So I don't think that's a mask a little bit for that disproportionality piece. So let me go on here. I'm going to actually hit that. It's on my current issues of things that we talk about. So we still do have issues with disproportionality. We're constantly training our school psychs and teams around bias and those types of things. But we also manage funding that is not tied to students with special needs. That when you have a partner district based on their demographics, their rates of suspension, their rates of identification, those are all kind of put into a model. And then it may say, for example, I can't even think, Parkway has a disproportionality issue. Maybe they're over-identifying. This is made up. I don't have that information right now. Our partner district folks would have a better idea of this. But let's say they're over-identifying African-American students as intellectually disabled and under-identifying them in the area of autism. Let's just say, because that is an issue that is known out there. We would look at how we're identifying students. We would look at the interventions that are in place in the school. But with regards to disproportionality, we have a funding source, whereas we work with our partner districts to say, we have some disproportionality coming out of this district, whether it be for suspending students with disabilities, whether it be for identification. What do you need as a partner district with regards to resources in order to address that and to better support students? So sometimes that comes in the form of behavior specialists. Sometimes it comes in the form of additional social workers. Sometimes it comes in the form, and this is targeted to work with students who have not been identified as students with disability, trying to do some services before that identification piece. We also have disproportionality in our suspension rates. So we have often see students with disabilities and students who are students of color with disabilities suspended at a higher level. And so what resources, what are we doing? What are we doing in those areas to look at behavior plans or functional assessments to figure out why students are, what's the function of that behavior, rather than just excluding them and sending them out of school. I think I was all over the place in that answer. I don't know that I answered exactly, but if you have some specific information that you'd like, I'd be happy to share my email with you, and you can kind of email me your questions and I can give you a better answer to that. Any other questions before we move on to, okay, Karen?
What type of training support do you give local staff? Because I'm a retired high school principal and my specialty was special ed. And my concern is that my regular ed teachers really do not understand some of the interventions and some of the strategies that they might be implementing And unless things have changed, I think our educators still just get one required course on gifted child, and that's the entire spectrum. So do you do anything with that?
Sure. So special school district has a very large learning and assessment department, and we have a plethora of professional development that is open to partner district staff. So staff employed by partner districts, in addition to the training we do with our staff. So we have a lot of training available. It's whether or not people want to access it. So part of that goes back to the relationship between the director and the SPED coordinators with the administrators in those local school districts, and partnering and identifying a need. As you know, as a principal and a regular at school, you have a lot of other training needs that you're trying to manage, curricular, whatever the latest initiative is. And so as a result, I don't believe we do as much special education training as we should, but it's available, it's there. It's just a matter of partnering and getting the buy-in from the teams to be able to participate in that. We bring specialized training out to teams if it's student specific, or we have a specialized classroom. It really gets down to relationships and being able to advocate as that administrator, that special ed administrator within that school, and the relationship you have with the administrator or at the district level to be able to say, hey, notice we need to do this, or what do you want to know more about? What does your staff need more? Because we need to continue to build the skills. Our goal is to have students with disabilities included as much as possible. If we have teachers and their primary teachers are general ed teachers who maybe don't have that experience, not going to go as well as if we have general ed teachers who have had training or specialized support to support a student in their classroom.
And then I have one more question: the type of program support services that you have for the parents.
We have a family engagement, community engagement department. It's very large. We offer family trainings, parent trainings, disability specific stuff. We support families in liaisoning with community resources. We have a very strong family engagement group here that supports family. And I can get you guys more information on that too, if you'd like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I also want to say, as one who worked under Kelly's leadership, she was bringing in race and equity training for our building long before other buildings or the rest of the district thought that was needed. And there is always training that's available within the district. The union, the national NEA, provides a lot of training for issues, special ed, equity, just about anything a teacher will encounter. However, it is often that individual educator that's going to step up and say, this is important to me and I'm going to do it. And so one of the reasons that I'm motivated to get this information out there is that there are also people that want to do it and don't know where to go. Like, no, they need to know more, but how can I do that? And so this is all part of that process. And the district has gotten stronger just even in the last few years in having resources available. Unfortunately, it's also at a time where most educators are feeling pretty overwhelmed already. So there you go.
And that really all I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead.
And are those services discussed in the IEP meeting? Because I've been out now for 15 years. So maybe things have changed, but I've never, in all the years, I never really heard that talked about in an IEP meeting, and type of services that you offer for families.
Oh, we have an obligation to talk with families about supports and services that they need to have them be equal participants in the IEP process. Absolutely, there is an expectation for that. Is it happening all the time? I would guess it's probably not.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah. So, but yes, it's again a situation of understanding the importance of having families. It's all with regards to the training. That also can be included in an IEP, that you want staff to be trained in this area. part of our teacher level staff and administrative staff that we have here are supports that specialize in certain areas. We have social emotional effective practice specialists who come out and support students who are struggling, and staff who are struggling to support students with challenging behaviors. We've seen an increase in, just as we have in the world, quite frankly, we've seen an increase in our schools in aggressive behavior. We've seen an increase in you know, whether that's resulting from trauma, drug exposure, or everything that goes with it. So we are, you know, microcosms of what's going on in the country, in our schools, but really being able to bring supports out. But again, it's a matter of making sure that we do. I'm not going to lie. We struggle with people being willing to accept the supports that we have to provide. Mm-hmm. So it's an easier, and this is a group that wants to work on equity and advocacy. It's easier to send a student somewhere else than it is to work on the stuff that you would need to work on in order to keep that student in the building. So I think that when we think about moving students out and into classrooms of special education classrooms, and moving students out into special education schools, we need to really, really, really seriously consider whether we have tried everything that we can as educators to make sure that we have really supported that student and tried everything we can, rather than we just don't want to be bothered with it.
And the other aspect of it is there's a huge difference between what's available in general ed in Riverview Gardens and what's available in general ed in Rockwood. Mm-hmm. And so there are times that a referral to special district is going to meet that individual student need that perhaps in a district that had more robust supports built into their gen ed program, it might not be necessary. That's my own political opinion, but I feel it needs to be said. Mm-hmm.
And it varies school by school, even within a district.
Yes. Yes.
Courtney? Ask me another question I'm not going to be able to answer very well.
Yeah, okay, here you go. My husband's a proud graduate of North County Tech, but that no longer is a full day program. Can you speak a little bit? I mean, I know it's funding, but you know, as we see more needs, I was just wondering about.
I don't know that was a funding based decision.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I think it was more of a decision to get back to supporting students and having the access to their traditional high school, and not. It was an equity issue as well, in that we had a more traditional based program in South Tech, and we had a full day program at North Tech, and I believe, I mean, that in many ways that North Tech program was moved into a full day program to make an option for students so that they didn't necessarily have to go to their local high school. And so, and I don't know a delicate way to say that. So, I wasn't in this position when that decision was made, so I don't have all the ins and outs of it, but a movement back to focusing on specialized instruction in the area of technical programming, and then supporting students as they are having that more traditional half day experience in their homes.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
And maybe you're going to get to this, Kelly, about what can we do from an advocacy perspective that you can share some strategies or some ideas that we can implement as Women's Voices members? Sure.
Get the word out. I mean, get the word out that we even exist. You know, I think that's one area. Educate yourself on special education law. Be a voice to be able to support family or friends who have students who are receiving services who may need support through that process. Helping them to navigate. I mean, the educational system's hard enough to navigate, and then when you put a disability and navigating then 2 districts and special education services on top of that, so being willing to help people who need support in finding resources. Think just the narrative around othering and excluding people, you know, and if you work in an organization that could help support people with disabilities, adults with disabilities, or students who may need post-secondary experiences, and you have an opportunity to partner with special or partner with a local school district to provide a community-based instruction experience for students, you can do that. asking hard questions. I mean, ask us hard questions, hold us accountable. That's another thing that you can do is hold us accountable to make sure that we are doing what's right for kids and that we are acting in a way that supports equity. I mean, we have 22 districts, and I would tell you that the services in one district look completely different than the services in another district, and we're working on that. But hold us accountable for that. If a student moves from Maplewood Richmond Heights to Rittner School District, some level of services should be similar. It shouldn't be a completely different experience. So we need to do a better job of that continuity around program, but also tell people about it. I mean, we are having a hard time recruiting support staff, people who want to work as teachers' aides or teachers' assistants who want to support students. It's hard work. So if you know people that are interested in working with kids, don't send them to Pattonville. Have them check out special school district as well. I think when people are like, oh, I'd like to go work in a school, they think only of their local school district. They don't think about the fact that special school districts employing a ton of people, and we're working really hard as a district to improve conditions and pay and all of those types of things and burnout, because people are leaving education, and so we want to support our staff. But recommend us, give us a chance. Those are all things you can do, but really holding us accountable and supporting people who are trying to navigate the process, and knowing that if you need help with that, I'm always available for you to reach out.
Have you ever thought about training us as individuals to be advocates for parents?
There's parent, we go.
So the organization that does that too. I'm sorry, I'm a parent too, and I just was going to say that. But
Okay.
there's an organization that actually does a full-on training. Some of the parent groups really, like, it's statewide, and it's supposed to be really good. I don't know if
So
Kelly,
Courtney, if you could give us that information.
I'd be
because I
happy
know
to. I would get it for you.
Our women's voices
Absolutely. And
members are so passionate and compassionate, and they want to be part of that change. So just a thought.
I will pass it on. To follow up on your question though, and what Kelly said about the teachers and staff, as a parent of a child, I have a history in working in this, but I also have I'm a parent. And right now I don't even, they've lost so many case managers at the school that my kid's in. I'm struggling to find him the right place. And so I really hope that not just special, but other school districts we can figure out how to change the dynamics about how we get teachers and support them, because it's hard when you're the parent and you want this, and there's not, I'm not saying that folks aren't working hard, but when you have turnover and everybody's new, then they're learning too. So I just, anything you can do we can help change the ideas about education and supporting, because some of these things like charter schools won't include special ed services. My kid won't get access to some of these things. So anyway, that's just my soapbox. Sorry.
Absolutely. And I think that showing some grace and patience right now is something that we can do just in general as a community for educators. So, as educators can leave, work from home and make as much as or more than what they're making, and not feel like they, are answering to administrators that may not understand or care, families who don't want what they want when they want it, without really a regard of the whole picture. I think that one of the best things that we can do as just a community in general is perspective taking. Like, understand that you may not know everything the parent is going through, but trying to understand from a point and seeing it through that lens, just like you may not know what the teacher's going through, or there's so many variables that go into all these decisions, and so many variables that go into how someone approaches a situation. Really trying to understand that from taking that balcony view. It's kind of cliche, but really looking at the big picture before you dig in just on your piece, I think. And as educators, we need to do that, and our partners need to do that as well. If that makes sense. Recruiting, retaining, disproportionality, providing high quality services, making sure we're using our resources in an equitable way. These are all areas that we are challenged by and that we need to continue to work on and so, but really getting, I will send Marge the information on to the link for our family supports. And I do believe we offer classes as well for families on how to navigate the system. So it may be offering a ride to someone or access to a computer. I mean, really, sometimes it's not so much about what's being offered. It's about the logistics that go into trying to get someone access to the services that are being offered. So really being mindful about access and the way we can support that, like giving people rides to the polls. I mean, we're doing that. So maybe if someone might need a ride to training, it's just, or access to a computer, or you to watch their kid for a few minutes, for an hour or two, so that they can attend and actually be able to do that. So those are that's what comes off the top of my head just initially.
And I would recommend that anybody that's interested, maybe that'll be another topic, Karen, that we could have that parent outreach group, because those are people that I worked with.
That's
that
right.
Actually the district has done a good job of bringing that hands-on direct experience from the classroom and as therapists, and now they're in positions to use that to bring the families into training or whatever else they may need. So there's a lot of resources that are there, but like Kelly says, we need to get the word out. Yes, moleapnetwork.org. You can see it in the chat, and that is a parent advocacy group. Another group that we're working with, Karen, Red Circle,
Right.
They are part of that group as well. So yeah.
And we're involved with that. And for those that are on the call, I just saw that somebody, Christine Brim's face showed up as one of the people that are on the call, and she's going to be part of our education panel for our program in March. Hi, Christina.
Hey, yes, so excited to be presenting in March and grateful to be here today, and great conversation.
So we do these lunch and learns so that people have a limited amount of time in their busy day. Are there other questions for Kelly? Are there other comments that folks want to bring to the chat or the group while we're here? Kelly's posted her email. And I will also recommend the SSD website. It has had an upgrade in the last year or so, so there is a lot of information that's there. I've had neighbors that came to me and just needed some help with navigating the website. And I was happy to do it. But there's a lot that's available.
Well, Marge, we thank you for putting this together. And
My pleasure.
Kelly, it's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I thank you for your work.
Okay.
If
And
you
Mark,
need
thank
anything,
you.
please,
Thank you.
please don't hesitate to reach out. Courtney?
Partners in policy making is the other one that I've heard is really good training. It's that's the one that can do some advocacy training, and I can throw it up here if you just give me 2 secs. I just didn't want that's the one that a lot of parents let me find, I just had it, but it's Partners in Policy Making does a training.
And I also got to do a shout out for Courtney, because she's been involved, and this is something we all can be involved in, is school board elections and recruiting people to school boards that are effective advocates for students, staff, community, that are really going to spend the time in looking at what's involved, because we have some people that are odd, is the safest way I can say, on some of our local school boards, and they can do some serious damage. And so it's not a glamour position, but Courtney was able to get a couple of people through that maze of, come on, let's do it. And so we have some really dynamic folks on the SSD board, which as Kelly mentioned is
I
kind
love
of
Tiffany.
weird in itself, but it makes a difference.
I love Tiffany, but that's my, I'm partial.
So, yeah, there are lots of things we can do. So I appreciate everything that everybody is doing and for everyone to show up today. And for me, it gives me a little boost to say, okay, let's keep up the good fight. And yeah,
Thank you.
And I thank everybody for being on the call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Marge,
Yes.
great job. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll see you Monday.
That's right.
And Courtney, I'll see you at the next whatever. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.